Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to the DM Roundtable for April 2019. This is our first such DM Roundtable, so I want to briefly explain what this new series is all about. This is a chance for patrons and I to get together and discuss topics in tabletop RPGs. Hopefully by sharing our ideas, thoughts, and experiences, we can all become better DMs, or GMs, not necessarily married to D&D. The DM Roundtable discussions are open to all patrons at every level of patreon.com/RogueWatson. You don't even have to be an active participant. You can just jump in here and lurk to your heart's content, and we are glad to have you. Personal shoutouts to my platinum patrons, Andrew, Brian, Richard, Joe, Will, Tiny Dancer, and Charles. And gold patrons, RPG Papercrafts, Charming Grenade, Pretty Boy, and Yuma, Marcos, David, god damn it, I've screwed it up. Marcos, David, Vicente, Gilberto, Sean, aka Sir 2B, Adam, Dead Lizard Lounge, Alkshy, and Sam. Thank you all very much for your support. I've only been saying that name forever. This month's topic, as determined by the poll on the Patreon page, was a tie. Responses were pretty evenly spread out between 4 of the 5 options, but 2 of them edged ahead, and that is player character death and balancing encounters. Considering the comments that we got on the poll were about balancing encounters, I think we're going to tackle that topic for this month's DM Roundtable. Joining me for this month are Adam.
Hello.
Mike.
Hey.
Marcos.
You killed my name. Prepare to die.
Wonderful. And Tiny.
What's up?
I think we might have gotten one more in the channel. Will, is that you?
Hello.
Hello. Excellent for you to join us. So as I mentioned, this topic is going to be all about balancing encounters, and I do not want this discussion to be just me talking the whole time. I'm just going to set things up, but this is something that I've struggled with for a long time as a DM. It's as intuitive as D&D 5th edition has been. I find that trying to create a well-balanced encounter is just never felt satisfyingly easy, I guess. Like the challenge rating system doesn't quite ever seem to mesh with what I want. And there's just so many outside factors. And D&D is such a swingy game in general, like, right? I mean, it's still based on dice, and you're kind of at the mercy of, if players make saves or don't make saves, that can make a big difference. But I'm interested to know how you all, if there's any kind of websites or resources you use or best practices for how to properly balance encounters.
I think it's interesting that the tying topic was character death, since optimal challenge is often so much what we strive to go for. And the threat of death is what creates that optimal challenge.
So would you say that encounters need to always be challenging enough that player death is on the table?
Not at all.
Player death should be on the table every session.
Oof.
But not in every single encounter.
Yeah, I mean,
I
it
agree.
definitely depends on the players that you have, I mean, if you're playing, a beers and cracker, Saturday night game with your friends, maybe not for that game, but if you're, playing with hardcore people, those type of groups might be the type of thing where you do take the CR, double it, and then toss it at them,
True, and I think it's especially tough when you have like lower level players. I know running through some stuff with like level 1, level 2 characters. I find it's hard to balance between having a good encounter and then possibly getting to the point where you're like, whoa, hold on, like somebody might die here, because it got real quick. So,
do you guys think that player death is part? Like, do you guys need to have the whiff of death to have the combat seem challenging enough to your players to seem satisfying?
I think one of my players prefers to have player death, has communicated that to me at least. And I mean, I haven't killed anybody yet, but I feel like I need to. I want to make them sweat, and I want to make it like a chess game in a way, and have them try to be strategic and try to survive. But I haven't haven't done it yet. Haven't killed anybody yet.
Specifically, I want to bring this around because player death, I want to have that be a separate, because I really think we can go off on player death and have some really great discussions, but I want to bring this around to balancing encounters, and that's a good point that that's obviously part of the balance, is if you want that to be on the table. But so for those of you that do want to create that experience, and obviously I always advocate for, know what kind of game you're running, know what your players are looking for. Do they want to be superheroes playing Diablo, or do they want to be playing Dark Souls, to use video game references? Like, it's very, very important to know what your players want and you be on the same page as that, because my team is very much kind of the former rather than the latter. But I want to know specifically, like, how do you balance those encounters if you want to make a really challenging encounter like that?
Specifically, playtest. If I'm running a level 1 encounter, I take 6 goblins. I take a playtest of the people that I'm running for, and I just do a mock game.
Where you run everything?
Yeah, I just run everything. Just roll dice, take some averages, take some damage averages. If they're dying more than they're killing them, I lessen it. If it's a steamroll, then I bump it up a little bit.
That's really interesting. So you beta test the
the and it definitely
That's a lot
helps.
of work.
It is a lot of work.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely helps because I do Adventures League and I run the games on Roll20 as well. So it definitely helps on Roll20 specifically because I can make changes as need be. If they pick up an NPC that I wasn't expecting, I know that NPC can only do maybe 1d8 damage around at most. I don't have to really change it. But if for some reason they befriend a freaking Felgalos dragon, it's like okay, let me toss a Frost Giant in here. So things like that. Whereas where it's more Adventurers League, that's where it's more like the I can't budget as much. If things change on the fly, it's like, well, you guys are going to have to think through this one.
Yeah, I guess you're much more constrained in that setting.
Yeah, for sure.
That seems like a really challenging thing to do as the players get higher and have access to more and more abilities. Like, that seems like it would be a really difficult thing to do once they get to like level 10 or level 15. Particularly, like how do you frame for all their different like things that they can do?
And actually, for the high level campaign that I ran, I specifically stopped when they hit level 12. I did not do that playtesting anymore. I was like, okay, here's a lich. What are you guys going to do about this? Just not out of nowhere. But yeah, it's like
girls.
The training wheels, not even the training wheels. Like, I'm giving you a unicycle. You've been on a bicycle. I'm giving you a unicycle. It's like, can you ride this? Oh, let me take away that wheel. Can you do it now? What, are you going to levitate? What you going to do? Let me see. So it just kind of depends on the level, the people that I'm playing with, the people I'm running for, and what they're looking for. I don't mind the extra work. I love it. It's my hobby, so.
Well, playtesting is a good advice to anybody. No matter how confident you are that you think you can average it all out in your head, you'll always be surprised when you playtest.
It's true. I think the hardest thing for me, like for instance, when I first ran some people through like the Lost Mines, I think it was hard for me to look at the encounters. And so, for instance, I was running 3 people through, and so that's not like optimal, like per the campaign. So it was really hard for me, especially early levels, to figure out how I can modify each encounter, that was in the book to try not to make it too hard or too easy. So I think that was definitely difficult.
There's a couple devices I like to use when planning an encounter. What I would consider like an epic encounter, like a life-threatening encounter, is for one to use like an aggro effect where they start off with one encounter, and depending upon the spells that they cast and the noise that they make, that'll draw in more monsters that I have waiting in the wings.
Yeah, the waves.
That area. I just posted on Discord like an encounter I just ran, and if you look at it, I mean, it's encounter CR 14. They're all level 4. They live through this, and it's amazing. But I did it in basically 3 waves. So I give them a little time, wear them out a little bit, then I'll bring in the next wave pretty much at the start of the next turn order, and then when they're through that one, there will be maybe another wave, and it all depends upon your dungeon, what you got planned going on, and how much noise they're making. I gave as an item, I gave a Horn of Blasting, which has a 600-foot radius. So they're damned if they do and damned if they don't. You know, in some certain situations, like they use it because they're really stressed and they need an AOE, but that only brings in more. But it's challenging and it's fun. And if you look at that encounter difficulty, I mean, that's just off the charts in terms of what they handled. This is in Lost Mine of Phandelver in Wave Echo Cave, and they can always handle more than what the encounter calculators tell you they can handle.
They can, which is what's frustrating about the whole balance system, because I thought the whole CR rating and the whole difficulty was supposed to make that more easier and intuitive, and it really doesn't. Like, it's still pretty frustrating. No. And maybe that's just a product of the fact that it's a dice-based game, and that ultimately, like, you can try to plan for as much as you can, but if multiple people fail, you know, what looks like an easy saving throw, and suddenly they're knocked down or shut down, then that can be devastating. Or versus they all make a save that you didn't expect them to, then that's the opposite of that. And what you were talking about with the waves, I know I've done the reverse of that. I've broken up encounters into waves in order to make them more a little more easier. So that's a good point, that you can actually break up things versus, like, you know, in round, and sometimes that's, you know, I obviously run a bunch of published content, but that's part of how a lot of it is written is, you know, on round 3 then this creature enters the fight, or on round 2 this happens. And I've definitely looked at doing that because that makes a big difference. And same thing with the surprise round, that makes a huge difference if you can get a shot off versus your enemies versus the allies can get multiple shots.
It's funny because of all those factors. I mean, even hard counters like elemental resistances, or like having daylight when there's a vampire around. Things like that will throw off an entire encounter. So I wonder why they made the equivalent of a level 1 character like a 1/4, as opposed to just making it an intuitive 1-for-1 system, since you're going to have to eyeball so much of it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's the funny thing. Like, if you take the custom monster CR creator in the back of the DMG and use it to, you know, to cross-reference the monsters that are in the monster manual,
they don't match, right?
They don't match. You get different CRs.
I don't understand.
If you take a freaking goblin and you make a goblin and then you use the CR calculator, you get a different CR. So that shows that the CR system is inherently incorrect.
Which way does it lean? Does it lean harder or lower than what it is?
It actually depends. I think specifically for the goblins are a little higher, because of their short bow attacks. That I think it's a D8. Like, if those hit some level 1, you know, party, if you can get a TPK just from short bows, goblins.
So
whereas you can take a lich in a level 5 party, and I saw on the table, you know, the level 5 party take on that lich, and somehow they won. You know, it can swing both ways depending on what you're trying to do. That's the reason why I do the play testing, is because, you know, like a CR5 is supposed to be for like a full party of level 5s. I've done it where I've taken that CR5 and put 5 of them, one for each for the party member, like. And they still kicked ass, you know. They still won.
Wow.
I think when it comes to doing that, though, like, you got to also consider, like, how depleted the party is. You know, like, are we talking about balancing encounters for like an adventuring day, or are we talking about balancing them over like a long period of time, like where they've been in a dungeon crawl and you're not letting them long rest and they're out of short rest, and you know, there's a big difference there. And then I think you have to adjust based, like, it's hard to do. It's easy to balance a single encounter. I think you can use all the methods that everybody's already mentioned, but like when you're really balancing, I think for me, it's like I'm balancing not only the boss fight at the end, but like, all right, do I want to have 4 encounters before that, and will they reach them all? Like, there's a lot of factors, and like, you know, do I put any kind of quote unquote power ups along the way, like, you know, give them extra healing potions, give them buffs, or any of those things that kind of signal to the players, or at least in my mind, it should be signaling to some of them, like, okay, you're getting this in this dungeon for a reason, and not to metagame them too much, but they should still in character understand, like, here's something powerful we can use to, like, if we encounter this quote unquote dragon or boss that we heard about's in this dungeon, we'll be ready, But I think the long game's more important than just like encounter versus encounter. And just as a rule of thumb, after tier 1, I don't even balance my encounters. I throw in what's interesting, and if I adjust on the fly if I see it kind of like going downhill. I tend to throw in, I kind of make them easier, and then I have like the one guy was saying, like a lot of things waiting in the wings, and I can throw them in a number of ways, like whether they were stealth, whether they were in another room and something opens up a door, whatever.
And that's a good point. I don't think D&D is at all balanced for like a fully rested party, even though I think it's supposed to be. But there's there's a huge difference between, is your party fully rested, and then immediately after that encounter can they just rest again, in which case they can just blow all of their, because and previous editions had a per like round and then per encounter and per day. Can they just blow all their per day things on this encounter? Well, that's going to make that encounter way easier. Versus the way D&D I think is supposed to be balanced, which is a war of attrition. You're dungeon crawling, basically. You have to manage your resources very carefully. And 5th edition added the short rest as a thing that you can get, a little bit of that stuff back. But
I have a theory about why the developers kind of went that way, like what you were just saying, Eric, like about whether it's a long game or short game thing. I think the developers are, like, the mindset of them, even though the modules that are designed don't reflect this, I think the way they want people to play it is like less encounters, less dungeon crawling, and more like role play for like 3 hours and then battle for 1 encounter per session. Like, I think it's almost designed in a way where it's like they expect maybe 1 to 2 encounters per session, which I guess is kind of on the average for me anyway. But some days, some sessions, I'm like, it's like 5, 6 encounters, small encounters, and then a big one at the end. And I think a lot of the game is designed around that initially, at least what was put in the player's handbook and the DMG when they first read it back in 2014.
They added the short encounter, or the short rest, makes it feel like that you're supposed to have a certain, and I think it's written somewhere in the book that you're supposed to have so many like it's designed for so many encounters per long rest at least.
Yeah,
so,
that's gotta be, I mean, otherwise hit dice don't serve any purpose.
And it makes overland travel really weird to do, and I always struggle, and that's a reason, obviously, in Tomb of Annihilation I changed all that to be a big house rule, but like overland travel almost becomes just nothing if you can, because at some point players know they can just blow all of their long rest abilities, because then they know they're just going to have this 1 encounter and then sleep and get all their shit back. It's
I
wonder if they should
that's actually why I always balance towards being long rested. And if they decide to blow everything for that fight, okay, excellent, you blew through it. What are you going to do against this next Stone Guardian?
Yeah, that's my mentality.
What are you going to do about the next one? And then what are you going to do about the Stone Guardian surrounding the Red Dragon? You blew all your stuff already. You're going to retreat? Okay, you retreat. The dragon burns the town and you fail your quest. What are you going to do? But then again, it depends on the people I'm playing with. If they're hardcore, like battle strategy, thinking about stuff, yeah. But if it's my dudes drinking beer, making jokes about kobolds, then no, it's a little bit different. It really depends on who you're playing with.
Yeah, and I liked what you did with Tomb, how you did not let them long rest through the jungle, because I feel like that would have almost made it too easy, like you're saying, that they know they can blow all their stuff on their encounters, and then they can sleep and rest overnight and have all their stuff back. So I really like that you did that, because I think it made it a lot more interesting, and it made it a lot more there was a lot more strategy involved with the players.
Yeah, I adopted that as well, coincidentally. I thought it was a good idea.
Yeah, because otherwise the hex crawling just doesn't seem very interesting or rewarding. And it's funny, as people would crack jokes, and Killian's player Rochelle always gave me shit about it, which was funny. But I really think it helped create more of a giant dungeon crawl, which was kind of the idea behind this jungle, as not being a safe place. And it was a good conceit for me to use, because that is a concern that I have about overland travel, is just random encounters. At that point, I mean, a lot of times random encounters should serve, and this could be a separate topic as random encounters, but a lot of them should serve story beats. So like in Princes, you had a lot of the cool like cult retaliations and things. But in the jungle, you can just have, fight a bunch of 4-armed gorillas just for funsies, but it still means something because they can't rest. They're still having to manage all these resources. But trying to balance for that ended up being difficult, but also because there were so many sessions between a long rest, I could very easily see like, okay, well, they're very, very low on resources now, so I know this fight is going to be harder than usual. Or, okay, they just got a long rest, so this fight will at least seem like it's a lot easier, but they would still have to know that they can't blow all their things. Now, obviously, once they made level 5 and were able to, Killian literally took a spell that kind of broke my system, which is fine.
That was funny.
That was pretty funny. Yeah, like, fuck you, I've got a magical
that was pretty
hunt
funny.
now.
I mean, my players saw that from like get word 1. Like they were like, "There's a way to stop that."
Yeah.
So, I think what you actually did there is you built in an excellent progression point so that they don't have to deal with paperwork. It's the same thing in a video game, right? You graduate past certain levels of paperwork if it's designed well.
Yep.
Yeah, that's true. And thankfully it worked out where I kept them in tier 1 long enough, probably way longer than I was actually even planning to, because that's where it was balanced for. That's what that system was balanced for. And a lot of you say you kind of drop a lot of your balancing things in the higher levels because low level kind of sucks, and it's kind of a problem RPGs have had forever. 5th edition actually fixes that a lot. We no longer have like the 2 hit point wizard bullshit of past D&D editions, which was awful. But low level is still very, very difficult because players don't have a lot of tools. They don't have a lot of spells to work with, and encounters that might seem challenging can quickly turn deadly because again it's a dice game and you just don't know how that shit's going to work. Yeah.
I think people were kind of talking around the edges of this with waves, but beyond sort of RP and making encounters more interesting, I mean, you get to turn them off. So one of the sloggiest things, right, in D&D is a fight that goes too long.
Yes.
Just turning off some of your waves. If it gets too hard, turn them off. If you need the more challenging mobs, skip to that. So it's an immediate tuner that you have that doesn't feel like you're killing things early.
I was going to follow up. Do any of you fudge your rolls at all? And I know that those of you that play on Roll20 and things can be difficult. Go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, that is the one thing I do not do. I actually have all my rolls public, and I roll with it. Like I'll tailor these encounters to my players. But if that goblin rolls a crit against the wizard in the back line, that sword's cutting his head off, and we just roll with it.
Literally roll with it.
There's been one time where I got a surprise round off on the group, and it went so well that I thought I was going to TPK them for sure.
Well, for you, not well for the players.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I changed the health initially. I just freaked out. I'm like, oh my god, I'm going to kill them all, and I changed their health. But then, like after maybe one round, I changed it back because I realized that like the characters are going to get it together here, and I mean, you have that flexibility. I think you've changed health on occasion.
Yeah.
But that's one thing I guess you can do. But I mean, what could I have really done? I mean, change the health, but I think if it was a TPK, I would have just let it be one and kind of apologize for making an encounter too hard. But I mean, the players are I would say mature and are accepting if you've screwed up in an encounter. I did a flame skull. I fireballed twice on accident, not realizing they're limited to one, and my players didn't say anything to me until after the encounter. Like, that was the same encounter that I flashed in Discord, where it's like CR 14. I made it even harder by fireballing them twice. But they're so they're not getting on you in the middle of the counter and messing your flow. If you've got good players, at the end of it, they may be like, you messed up here, but it's okay.
I think,
and they're generally forgiving. You're putting in a lot of work to it, and it's an art and a science. But
hey man, your flame skull's got 2 eyes, 2 fireballs.
Yeah,
right.
And a lot of this comes down to how metagaming are your players? Like, how familiar are they with a lot of the monsters you're throwing at them? Because
that's the thing too.
The first time, and me and my players, my friends, we're not super knowledgeable about D&D, especially compared to a lot of D&D shows and streams out there that know how to do everything and min-max all that, and we are just kind of more about having fun with it. Obviously, we've become very knowledgeable over the years now, but the first time my players encountered a lich, I had to like message my wizard player and be like, hey, by the way, a lich is one of the most powerful like beings in this universe. And he was like, oh, okay, hey guys, we probably shouldn't fight. It's a lot of it depends. Whereas if your players know D&D and you say lich, and they're like, oh, a lich, oh shit. So a big part of the balance is like how much,
including intuiting weaknesses, right? Like anybody, like pop culture zombies, like how many of those weaknesses just carry over as opposed to, are you supposed to roll for it? I think monster identification's always been a bit of a weird, it's been weird for a while. It started off like nobody knew anything about a monster ever, like way back when, but I don't know, where is it now?
I don't know what the official rule is. I don't know if they added that in Xanathar's or not, but we have a house rule now that we've used quite a few times as a free action. You can roll... Chris used this for his Storm King's Thunder campaign, and I stole it from him, and I don't know, I forgot where he got it from, but you can roll either like a history or arcana or religion, or just kind of depends on whatever check is the... like each kind of monster type has a different skill check you can roll in order to have it be like your player is trying to like recall knowledge about that creature, and that at least felt a little more organic. And then depending on how you rolled is actually how much information you learn. So like the basic thing, you would know like the name of the creature and like relatively how strong it is to your party, and versus if you rolled like a 20 plus, then you would probably know like individual resistances or abilities that it had.
Yeah, I use the same thing. Depending on what they're trying to learn, at least in my head, in a world where literally dragons can burn your village at any time, people know that trolls regenerate. People know that ogres probably have a bunch of goblins with them. People know that if you see one goblin, there's more goblins. Metagaming to that extent, it's okay with me because these guys are adventurers. Even a level 1 person is, twice as strong as just your dirt farmer that lives on a farm somewhere. But if they're like, I want to know what the horn of a red dragon will do while mixed with the blood of a roper, it's like, oh, okay, you're going to need to roll a arcana check, and you're going to need to get like a crit 28 or higher.
Yeah, that could be a whole campaign just figuring that out.
Yeah,
I think I've done that too before, where like I've told players, hey, you would know that, I don't know what an example is, but like you would know that a white dragon is more like feral and stupid than a other kind of dragon. Like that kind of stuff does seem like it would be in the general like population, especially in like if somebody's graduated from the famous adventurers correspondence school or something.
Yeah, this is the world with monsters. The fact that people aren't extinct means that they know things.
They probably should be.
They know that you put the chicken head that you cut off in the forest so that the Fae can eat it, and don't take your children at night.
Why?
They know you spin 7 times before you go to the well, so that way the hag in the well doesn't take your brain. They know stuff like that.
Do you make the assumption that they know every monster then, or is there a
not every? It depends on the monster. Like if they because I do a lot of world building as well. Say they live in dirt farm in village 17, in the plains. If they're asking about purple worms, it's like you've never seen a purple worm before. You're going to need to find out information about that.
You consider the local lore of what they're... Yeah.
Exactly. If they're asking about freaking Atropulse, the head of the primordial that floats in space 7 planets away from Toril, how the hell is your person going to know that? No. But if they're asking, hey, what language does a goblin speak? I don't know. What kind of...
Are you taking in an individual character's backstory when you're making these judgments?
Yes.
So here's a question, to use a recent example from Tomb of Annihilation. Do you think I should have told my players more about who like Valindra Shadowmantle is? Because I feel like that's a situation where players that might know more about D&D lore would have recognized that person.
It depends. Like
how famous are they? Like, does D&D have like celebrity?
Actually, I mean that's an oversight in the module.
They definitely do. Like people like Eldminster. You say Eldminster and anywhere in the Forgotten Realms, people are like, oh yeah, I know that guy. Or heard about him. But if you say, like Driz, you say Driz, people are like, wait, isn't it that famous? I heard stories about him. But if people like Valindra, you'd have to know somebody who dealt with her or deal with her specifically.
What I would have done there is probably like, if you from your DM perspective, if you were trying to like get them to know like or try to like reveal that information, I would have prompted them to make a history check right then and there. And then if they, make it kind of hard, 15 up or whatever. And then if they get it, then you can be like, okay, and so that way they know, like someone knows.
Yeah.
I like that always caveat that like if the person who wins the check too, I'm like, this, but not everybody in your party does. And if you say it out loud right now, then the person you're checking on knows too. So like, but I would have prompted them maybe to do some type of history check in a situation like that. Plus that world builds right then and there, right? Like that kind of gives you immersion, and that's the stuff that makes it cool.
Yeah, and even then, I probably would only let Mannix roll that history check, based on his background. Celeste, she probably would not, unless she rolled a quit and maybe heard the name while she was a slave.
That's true.
But, yeah, but
I think she did ask if she knew Valindra, and I just said no. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure, Valindra was pretty high up on the hierarchy with them.
Wasn't she in charge of didn't she orchestrate part of the spell plague or have something to do with it, or can't remember her lore, but
yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head either.
She might be kind of infamous. I knew her from a video game, the Neverwinter game, and then something like she was like this lich basically.
Yeah, shockingly, my players didn't actually they knew that she was doing that illusion, but they didn't actually want to provoke any of that. So I was kind of fine the way it ended up, but that was an interesting example of my players not being involved in the D&D like lore universe, so that they weren't immediately like treating that situation as anything other than just I'm meeting this mysterious person. So that was an interesting thing on metagaming, because I think that makes a big difference on encounters. Is like, does your players know like the capabilities of a creature versus their character might not know, but the player is still going to be like, okay, well I don't know that a roper can grab you and bring you, or like I need to check this cave for ropers, whereas a player could just walk through a cave and not be looking up. There's a lot of metagaming involved with
it's metagaming in general is just an inherent flaw of RPGs. I think it's just there's no way you can prevent it or avoid it 100%. So just go with it, just roll with it every time.
I think you should try to align. I have players at my table that are vastly different experience levels, so I try to align their knowledge of the creature quickly. So a roper is also a very visually distinct creature.
Yeah.
It gives a hint at what it can do. Resistances are definitely hard though, right? Where it's just like, here's just hidden info. So I think you kind of have to customize your lineup and just teach your players early on that they can't depend on a metagaming knowledge of this. Like, you don't know what's going to have a legendary action.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can always change it. It's like, oh, well, I know that trolls, well, I mean, that'll be okay. But it's like, oh, I know that this red dragon is allergic to dandelion. Oh, well, suddenly you realize that it's not. This is the different red dragon. This was not allergic.
Because it grew up in Chult and around these glass volcanoes or something. So it's just going to be a little different.
And that's where like custom creatures come from too. Obviously, as the DM, you can make like either entirely unique creatures or just take existing monsters and modify them slightly so the players aren't quite sure about what they're facing.
Roll20 is pretty great for that, which is nice.
Mm-hmm.
I overhaul my dungeons quite a bit because, well, A, sometimes you get people in your group that have played it before, but B, I assume people are going to metagame, not only looking at monsters, but even looking at the book. So I add new monsters. I mean, I had one player, who did Wave Echo Cave asked me afterwards, like, man, was that in the book? And I'm like, oh no. And that way,
that's a great idea.
You throw that stuff in there so that they know that just looking at the book, not only it actually puts them at a disadvantage, because if they think that they can just walk into a room and murder hobo everybody, and then you got something in there that they weren't expecting, well, then they've screwed up and they realize that their meta knowledge is what got them in trouble. I do that a lot. I also, one other things that I do, I mean, since I started level 1, I've been using the same encounter difficulty calculator, and in every like big fight I have, I save that calculation, what I did, and then I can use that as my gauge. And each time I create a new encounter, I can make it a little bit harder and a little bit harder. And if you notice, I just threw out there my Cragmaw Castle encounter, which I did in waves as well. And that's just a little bit lighter than my Wave Echo Cave encounter. Actually, no, it's about the same. But I think I did it in more waves than the Wave Echo Cave encounter, which made it a little bit easier. But and then afterwards, I take that encounter snapshot that I have, and in my recaps, I actually post it out there for the players to see, and I hopefully they get some sort of sense of satisfaction that, like, damn, we survived that, and I think that's cool.
I'm looking at the thing you posted right now. You have 6 and 7 players in your for PCs.
How long did that take to play
Well,
out?
I have in the Cragmaw Castle. Oh, it's a full session. Like an epic encounter can be nothing but combat the entire time, and that's okay with me. But if you notice, the one that I had 7, I had planned an NPC captive in this encounter, like a Princess Leia cleric, and she helped out with the thing. So I use things like that, maybe an NPC sparingly to help me to balance things in case things go really south. I can, maybe do a mass healing word just to breathe life on them, because I did. I hit him with a lightning bolt, and I dropped like 3 players, and so I needed to do something just to keep things going, because I don't want to kill off my characters. I really don't. It's just a lot more work for me.
I mean, and that's what we're talking about. Like,
true.
That's the razor's edge that I think good DMs ride on. Is you want to try to make something as, and not every encounter, but the good encounters as challenging as possible. But I don't think you want to go overboard and ever do a TPK. Now you can work with that story-wise, and be like, well, they captured you, and now you're in this situation. That works depending on the monster type and what's going on. But I think getting it as close to the wire as possible without, like, failure is always, like, a really tricky goal that I try to go after with the harder encounters, and I almost never... It was, like, just to use an example, like the fact that Oralunga, the gargoyle fight, ended up being the hardest fight in that stupid dungeon that I made. It was very shocking to me. Like, that was way difficult for the players, and then they kind of walked over every other encounter in there.
I've had a lot of TPKs turn into amazing storylines.
Yeah, same here.
I had a good encounter once where they went into this elven ruins, and there was all these drow, and there was like drow priestesses, and they just got overwhelmed, and they literally they beat them, but then they had to retreat. Like, there was like 1 or 2 there was like 3 survivors, 1 death. So they took the character out, and one of them was a warlock, and he beseeched his patron, which I believe was Demogorgon, to bring back his dead companion, and then Demogorgon cut him a deal, and it turned into this whole thing. Then he had a geese put on him for the deal, and anytime he disobeyed Demogorgon throughout the rest of the campaign, it was the greatest role play the guy did up to that date, because I was like, okay, Demogorgon is literally sending pain through the hells, and you feel intense pain. And everybody thought he was crazy. No one trusted him anymore, and he wasn't allowed to talk about it, or Demogorgon would torture him again. So that single character death turned into like a thread of a campaign, like a role play thread, an underlying thread, right? Like, that really enhanced the game in ways that I wasn't even really expecting, or hope for. And it was all done on the fly, because I really didn't balance the encounter too well. I really made it like a little too crazy, but those are the best moments for me.
But so nowhere did you think during that encounter, like, oh, I need to have some of these drow like back off, or have these like this random like owlbear show up to fuck up their back line or something?
I played it as when I saw it was going south for them, I started to like play it a little bit more conservative and stuff. So,
okay.
I kind of let them live, but they still ended up getting one person just dead. So
because those, I mean, player death, and that's again a separate topic I want to explore. I can always create some good scenarios, but specifically on like encounter balancing, and especially on the fly stuff. So yeah, as some of you have commented, I don't fudge my rolls because I also use Roll20 and everything's public, but what I definitely can fudge with is hit points. And I don't think I've ever, I mean, it's on the tape somewhere if I have, but I don't think I've ever given something more hit points. I probably have at some point, but
I actually don't think so. As
Yeah.
a person who's watched literally every video on your YouTube
Bless you,
channel,
sir.
I have not seen you add hit points to any.
I think what ends up happening is I balance it the other way, and I think it's been mentioned here before, but you can generally tell like when the cadence of a fight is over, like it's crested its big climactic moment, and it just becomes players basically doing cleanup work. And I feel like if we were playing Theater of the Mind, then I would just say, okay, you know, the next couple of hits are just going to kill all the enemies. But and since we're in Roll20, I just do the equivalent of that. Is like, okay, well, you know, this monster had 2 hit points left. Well, fuck it, you did, you know, enough damage to kill it, because that's the one hidden number that I have as a DM is the hit points. And at that point, you know, is this monster potentially getting another round of attacks? Is it going to do anything? You know, if it's a big dragon or something, then maybe yeah. But we have, you know, most of the time it's just some random cannon fodder. Then no, it's not going to do anything. So that's, I don't balance it to make it easier necessarily, although it does make things easier. But it's more of a time constraint and just a sense of like, you know, this fight has run its dramatic course, and I don't need things to hang on just to be slavishly devoted to the arbitrary number of hit points that I rolled for it.
Yeah, I think the pacing matters so much more in that situation.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost like balancing the encounter for the sake of the pacing, and that's one thing I don't always balance in my head before I'm setting something up. But yeah, there's a few tricks you can use to like, you know, adjust that pacing, like you said, Eric. Like just dropping something that gets hit with like, you might have 20 hit points left, but okay, it just had 2 in that instance. So
One thing,
especially if you run out of ideas for keeping the fight dramatic for them.
One thing I noticed whenever I used monsters that weren't in the official monster manual or Mordenkainen's and all the other ones they've added, I've used monsters from like Kobold Presses, Tomb of Beasts before, a massive thing. And one thing I noticed is, first of all, those monsters are a lot harder on paper versus their CR value. But what they do a lot of times is they have a ton more hit points. And I've done this before too, where I've said even on Crafting Annihilation, I'm like, oh, I should give this thing more hit points. And everybody's like, no, don't do that. And they're right, because I don't think just straight giving things more hit points makes a fight. I mean, it can make a fight more difficult, but I don't know if it makes it more interesting.
I think it's almost the wrong way to go about it.
Yeah.
I think I've started balancing more and more for number of turns I expect this combat to go. So that's really kind of saying I want to give my opportunity. It's an old saying we had at work, which when I was doing game stuff, which was give the players opportunities to really like do the thing they want to do well. You know, it's kind of like when you're playing an MMO and you get to blow all your cooldowns. So I'm not saying use everything that you would for a long rest, but they have things they want to do. They have skill checks they want to make, and you have X amount of time for them to do it in.
Yeah, that's true. And I think it's been said before that try to tailor encounters to your group and make sure they have cool things they can do. Although I think occasionally that can work in the reverse. So if you've got somebody that's a dedicated archer, I think throwing them into an encounter where they are like in a tunnel and they can't really maybe do their archery could be an interesting like single encounter. But
absolutely, right? Yeah, it's like make them feel good, make them feel challenges so they can overcome them, and then give them opportunities to shine when, you know, variety's the spice.
Yeah, for sure. But and that's why I like the Terror Folk so much that I mentioned during Crafting Annihilation is, unlike a lot of the monsters from the Tomb of Beasts that were just big meat sacks, the Terror Folk are kind of glass cannon-y. Like they don't have a lot of hit points. They have garbage armor class, but they get like 3 attacks off and they hit pretty hard and they can fly around. That's a really fun, aggressive, scary enemy to use. But it's not scary in that it hangs around too long. It's like it stays there for as long as it can. So I like balancing. And I didn't really notice that until I had the Terror Folk, and I'm like, yes, this is what I like in a monster. I like a monster who has a lot of fun offensive abilities, but isn't necessarily great defensively, because that means the players.
I'm glad you brought that one up.
Yeah.
Sorry, finish.
No, I was just gonna say I think that makes the players feel really good when they down them, but it also makes the situation still very scary and tense because they're taking a lot of damage in the process.
I think it was watching that fight that really solidified my belief that I kind of wanted to take more powerful monsters, play test them, as was mentioned earlier, to make sure that they weren't going to one-shot, but otherwise just cut their hit points in half.
Yeah.
So basically have fewer monsters on the table, so my players are the ones acting more often, but try to rely on things like legendary actions and interesting abilities and some interesting minions, and then just keep this fight short by cutting all the hit points in half.
The pre-published campaigns actually do that a lot. I've seen a lot of instances where it's like, oh, you're fighting a hookar, but it's got a broken eye and like has half the hit point. Like, so they'll give you some role play reason why it happened. But like,
yeah, it's even more interesting that way with the broken eye and stuff. And you're wondering what can I depend on with my knowledge and what can as a player.
Gotta watch out for those broken eyes, man.
It's like having the action RPG Diablo with all those different prefixes and suffixes on there. Like make them have different. I think it was a DM's Guild thing I reviewed that had a system like that where you could add different modifications, which is the opposite of like giving them various disabilities. Is instead giving them extra abilities to even up their CR value without making them.
It's a shame there's not a built-in mechanic to do that on the fly.
That's true.
Like that would be very helpful if Wizards could come up with one. I don't know how they would do it, but
yeah. And
I've
like,
actually started.
I mean, they probably could. Like, if you wanted to add like aggressive, like take the CR and triple it or something.
Didn't they do an old giant sizing thing for wildlife? I can't remember, but it was like how you changed a badger into a giant badger. I just had a stat boost thing.
Oh,
I don't know that it's any more helpful than just making it stronger on your own, but
I think the rule now is you just take like a giant bear and just flavor it as a badger or something. I think is what
probably.
Yeah.
I find myself doing it a lot because I'm a dinosaur nerd, and so doing Tomb Annihilation, I really wanted to do more colorful stuff and better art and really go into more CR levels so that Druid could enjoy himself more. And they don't have a Pachycephalosaurus, but like everybody loves those ram-headed guys. So putting in, like, and then you're like, well, if I want to make it a good one, then he's going to be bigger and it's going to be a higher challenge rating. So now I got to put in a baby one, and like just. There's certainly a rabbit hole with custom monsters, but I really think they're kind of the way to go to get like more bang for your buck for like time and challenge.
I do have to ask: Are you the bird dinosaur guy? Or are you the old-fashioned, old-school dinosaur guy?
So there's nothing I can do about the fact that like when my players say raptor, they mean Jurassic Park. So like I can't be like velociraptors or turkey vultures. So I have to ride this line between like. Fine, a T-Rex is fast, and no, it won't kill itself if it falls over. Right?
Stupid science trying to ruin dinosaurs.
So I'm grabbing most of my art from like Ixalan and stuff like that, so that there's, if it does have feathers, it's because it's cool, or because it's like the unique one.
Quick question. So 160-foot fall doesn't have a CR value to it. What are you planning on doing? How do you plan on incorporating that into the next session?
It's kind of like traps too, right? Like traps are sort of that.
Yeah.
Whoops.
Yeah, because that's not really included in any kind of balance calculator that the D&D does. Even though traps and environmental hazards are not only should be factored in, but I think always make something more interesting. Like the way you make an encounter more interesting isn't necessarily about just adding more foes, but like. Make it over a bridge over, a river or waterfall, or have them clinging to a cliff, or a cave that you can't make much noise in, or there's a pit somewhere, like all those kind of, a pit of snakes in the middle of the players that your stupid players can take full advantage of with their stupid whip swords. Why did I do that? Curses.
Traps are the epitome of that dice roll problem too. They can do a lot, or they can do nothing, or they can, they don't even go that way.
Yeah, exactly. Like, are they going to just miss all of these athletics checks and just fall off this cliff, and then my monsters are not doing anything compared to just good old gravity doing the work for me? But
quick tangent question: how often do you guys have like stove is hot, and then they all press the stove kind of traps?
A few times.
Oh wow!
They do it. They do.
How can you not?
The groups always do it once, and then when I kill somebody, they learn.
it's just funny that with my party, the more they deliberate, the more they say, fuck it, we're just gonna go do something. Like they almost have this like threshold of like, how long are we gonna decide to do something before?
I got a player that does it all the
Darren's done
time.
that a few times.
Yeah, I was gonna say Reese is great about that. He's like, fuck it, I'm going
there
in.
and just jumps in. Yeah.
Yeah, he's like, okay, I go bear form, I charge in.
All right, friggin' druid, wild shaping druids are like immortal though. To be fair, like goddamn, it is so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
They're one of the most powerful classes in Tier 1, I would say. They're frustrating to balance around.
That's true. Yeah, they can the fact they can turn into a giant bear at level 1 is kind
all
of
those hit points just really change the game. So
yeah, he is effectively tanks. It's kind of too bad because I was hoping I would play a druid similarly. I would want to be like the Animorph druid and just constantly shapeshift, but I would want to also do it like, be a mouse and scout ahead and do kind of other things with wild shape and not just treat it as a like combat form.
So, owing to the setting and the wild shape rules you were using, I really wanted one in my campaign, and they're having less fun with their combat form because they chose a tiger and they don't have the multi attack. And I can tell that they feel limited. Like the temporary hit points are there, the combat like numerical advantage is all there, but just the rolling one die and not feeling like I turned into this form was a real disappointment, and I can tell. However, they do have, like a cat form, non-combat stuff, so they're doing that part of it quite a bit.
Yeah,
but the multi-attack was a big selling point, I think, for that bear. Like it makes it feel fun. Or the giant spider has the unique attacks.
I do enjoy when he turns into the giant spider because that at least has extra things in there. But yeah, I gave him essentially. The rules we use is he was able to choose 3 forms, no questions asked about how he got them at level 1, and then from there he has to gain his forms Animorph style organically. And the only bummer is he just ends up using that stupid giant bear form 90% of the time.
I know.
He's just had beginnings, so it's been fun because he does enjoy gaining new forms, and he seems to generally enjoy that, which is awesome. But he doesn't actually seem to use any of them, and that's almost a design flaw with how good the bear is compared to other things. Like the bear is just kind of an all-in-one fighter with the multi-attack and the giant hit points and decent AC. Like it just doesn't have any flaws. So it's like from a design standpoint, like why would I not choose the bear at, if I can have anything else at the CR level?
There's a good that's going to be an interesting point for him soon, since I think he's just acquired a Deinonychus form, right? So he can do the raptor multi-attack. But he won't have the same size and hit points of the bear. But they're both CR1. So I guess by not having the bear, I was hoping he'd have more progression. I'm just hoping he'll have more.
The most fun I saw him do that, obviously he did some cool stuff with the spider in Mabala and at Fort Belwarian, and then when he did the well in Mabala, he actually used his like swing forms and then climbing forms, and that was really fun to see that he had that kind of flexibility, which was fun. But yeah, not to get too far off track, since we're nearing the end of our hour-long discussion, final thoughts on balancing... Yeah, I know, right? Final thoughts on balancing encounters for D&D. Kind of what... we've kind of discussed like what we like to do, the problems we run into, but I'm just interested to know just what your all closing thoughts are on this topic.
Don't overthink it. Just throw it at them. That's
always good advice, but it's also I bet as a new DM is frustrating to hear whenever it's like, just
I know,
and people like Jerry Holkins always say like they just ad-lib everything. I'm like, man, I can't do that.
Do your best to balance it like within the confines of the rules, and then learn from your mistakes and adjust accordingly on the fly where you can, and take it from there. And then just know your players. That's a big deal. Yeah.
Unless they're level 1, they're a lot tougher than you think they are.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think once they get into those higher levels, I think it becomes less of an issue for me. So.
Sounds like the playtesting can really help avoid some of the pitfalls of being too aggressive too early. But it sounds like everybody here uses their own personal judgment as far as the tactics of the enemies to kind of keep the encounter balanced on the fly.
Yeah, it's all about playtesting. If you have goblins, they're not going to be super organized and know to attack the back line and have the front line, draw fire away from their back line. No, they're going to be like, you call me stupid face, I shoot you.
That's something we didn't
know.
even discuss. Is like the relative intelligence of the opponents, like the fact that a dragon is going to treat a combat encounter different than a bunch of goblins versus multiple
my
factions.
dragons are dragons. They're not going to sit there and swipe at you. They're going to fly into the air, swoop down with fire, and you're going to have to use those fly spells to chase after them.
So their tactics on top of whatever RP motivation you have for the fight, right? Which can really influence if everything has sort of a reason for happening rather than just being a hobo fight, so to speak. Then you have an out, I guess. You have a lot of ways to end the encounter or sort of influence it.
Yeah, that's true. You could have just a conversation happen that makes everybody stand down or something, and that's something that's unique to tabletop RPGs. I guess a few video games can do a little bit of that, but most of them are like you have to make a choice and then you accept that choice and then you go on. But with tabletop RPG, you can have a conversation happen at the beginning and then a fight happens and all of a sudden like a player or an enemy can surrender and that can change the outcome of a fight. I did something similar with the Dung Rung Lung fight because
capturing, man. I have a lot of my NPCs get captured.
Yeah.
Oh my god, I hate that. It's the worst.
I just have a bucket of names and personalities associated with it. A lot of goblins named Screamal. Like Scream.
That's awesome.
Oh man.
This could be. I think that could be a whole other topic. It's like.
Yeah, that actually can.
Yeah, trying to come up with.
I specifically name all of my monsters. That was funny. You were talking about how you just started doing 1, 2, and 3.
Mm-hmm.
I name like all my goblins have their own name.
Oh,
Bootface,
awesome.
Milky, Stink Butt. They all have their own names because they interact with each other during the fight.
That's great.
I love goblins.
I mean, that's great. It's great for having to talk in the fight, though.
Yeah, like my players will be like, hey, Goblin, you stink. One Goblin like, ha, you stink. And then Goblin's like, no, shut up. And then those two will start fighting, because that's what fucking goblins do. They're stupid. But if you've got a freaking honor guard guarding the king, you say, hey, stupid face. They're going to look at you and then smash you in the face with their mace.
I love it.
But that definitely is a whole nother topic.
Indeed, and we'll definitely be having more topics throughout the months. Hopefully we can do one of these every month. I had an absolute blast doing this, guys. Thank you so much for joining for this month's DM Roundtable. Thank you to Adam, Mike, Marcos, Tiny, and Will. Thank you, everybody. I think so. I am Eric. Hopefully doing one of these every month for patrons. Patreon.com/Rogue Watson. And I'll see you guys next month.
Bye.
Bye.
Awesome. Thanks
for having us.
Yeah.